reading when I'm done with this. So the other day, I said I wasn't going to get into it. I said that. Okay, I woke up this morning. I was watching my videos back. They said, "Oh yeah, you are. You are." All right, so we are about to get into this. Um, I'm gonna start by saying one thing that I noticed, and I've said actually, is that when one thing affects one group, it affects all because we're all interconnected. Okay, we're interdependent, we're interconnected. If it affects one group, it affects the others. So what I'm about to show you here, I'm going to be able to put it into different, different contexts to show how it's not just white people. It's not just white people. Okay, it's not. But there is a difference when it comes to institutionalized racism. Okay, but when it comes to the lower level racism, it's everybody. We all fucking up. Okay, so here we go. I'm about to read a couple articles about covert racism. The one that I thought was the best. Let me see. We'll start with the shortest one. This is the shortest one. Just a simple, what does racism look like, overt versus covert, okay? And I'll say this because it doesn't really say it in any of these. What I find is that overt racism breeds covert racism in the offspring, okay? And it goes back and forth. Overt racist parent, covert racist child, overt racist grandchild, covert racist great grandchildren. You see what I'm saying here? It does a cycle like that. Because the thing about covert narcissism, I mean, that's essentially what it is, though. But the thing about covert racism is that it's just like covert incest and subliminal messaging. Okay, it's a subliminal message. So whether you outright say that you're a racist, it still sends those signals, and that child then picks up on that, and they show those biases loudly, overtly. Okay, and so and then that other the great grandchild will go on to be a covert because they are either ashamed of their parent or their behavior, but they've already been given the signals, and it's inlaid very deeply. So overt racism or explicit racism is the intentional and or obvious harmful attitudes or behaviors toward another minority individual or group because of the color of his or her skin. It includes any speech or behaviors that demonstrate a conscious acknowledgement of racist attitudes and beliefs rooted in white supremacy ideology, which it seeks to reinforce and maintain. It's distinguished by blatant use of negative attitudes, ideas, actions directed at non-white racial groups, can be practiced by individuals, groups, institutions, and across societies. And with the rise of the civil rights movement and passage of civil rights protections, overt racism has become largely taboo in American society. However, recently there has been a rise of overtly racist incidents such as hate crimes corresponding to the election of President Trump. Okay, that was cited in 2019. Overt racist actions are those that are easiest to see and describe as racism, unlike the more insidious or covert forms of racism. They call it insidious, but I find that with the covert stuff, it can very well be subconscious. And I'm going to give you an example real quick of overt racism in my life pertaining to President Trump, okay? Literally the day after he was elected, I was walking on OSU campus, and somebody threw a bottle at me and said, "It's Trump time, N-word." What? Luckily, the bottle didn't hit me. They missed, and it hit the ground like right in front of me. right? So definitely did have definitely did have some tones of overt racism, because it's my mother used to say he's not a racist. He's not a racist, and she actually voted for Trump. But um, when you say "Make America Great Again," that is a covert statement. Okay, it's a covert statement, and that's why so many of them picked up. Uh, it's what I keep saying. It's a subliminal message. Okay, so for those who are overtly racist, they picked up that covert racism immediately. Okay, so anyway, covert racism is a racial discrimination that is concealed or subtle rather than obvious or public. So, that is acts to subvert, distort, restrict, and deny racial minorities access to societal privileges and benefits. A key feature of covert racism is that its disguised nature allows perpetrators to claim plausible deniability and to essentially gaslight their victims, that is, to deny that the act was racist and undermine any claim of harm. It may be implicit as a result of unconscious bias that exists within an individual, regardless of ill will or any self aware prejudices. Okay, so that touches on what I said. It can be very subconscious, especially if you were raised with overtly racist people, lived in a very racist environment. You, it's not anything that you'd be self-aware of. In some cases, there are some people, they are only covert racist because they do not want to be called a racist. Okay, they don't want that. That's taboo. Okay, and so they don't want to rock the boat. So what they do is they behave in a covert manner, but like maybe with their friends, they're very overt. Okay, so there's two different sides to the covert stuff. It can be subconscious, or it can be very, I don't like black people and I'm going to do all this undercover stuff to let people know. Okay, I don't like any type of person that's not me, because it's not just, nothing is ever just specific to one group. So that is the end of that article. That article came from fitchburgstate.libguides.com, Fitchburg State University. Okay. The next one we have. I'm actually not doing readings right now. I'm going to be doing a general reading here later. Speaking of which, before I go into it, I said something about 3 people. Do you know I lost 3 subscribers? They know what's up. All right, so most of us recognize and stand solidly against overt expressions of racism, such as slurs, violence, and blatant racial segregation and discrimination. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. More often, discrimination is disguised and shows up in subtle ways, covert racism, such as implicit biases, microaggressions, and racially coded language. Often people who say and do things are unaware of the racism that informs them. Mama? Alright, well, that's peace. This is, okay. Okay. So, we're gonna look at, this is really, I like this one. This one was really informative. I think, yeah, it is. But it's not the one I wanted. This isn't the one. Well, we're still gonna use it. We're still gonna use it, because the other one tells you what the subliminal message is. So we're gonna use this one for something very simple. It explains, it gives a definition of each of these different types of socially acceptable and practiced covert racism tactics. Okay, so it gives a list here. says white silence, racial profiling, denying institutional racism, police brutality against people of color. And that's not, again, it's not just black people. I gotta keep saying that because I advocate for all people, okay? I advocate for all people. And it's not just white people doing it. And eventually I will get to the demonstration of what that looks like for you, okay? So, tone policing, there's only one human race, comment. Invalidating or disbelieving the experiences with racism, touting respectability politics, fear of people of color, denying white privilege, bootstrap theory, microaggressions, rewriting history, which has already been touched on when in part 2, where I mentioned that the movie for the 9/11 incident, terrorism attack, they portrayed the hero as a white man when it was actually a black man. So that's an example. Okay, Eurocentric school curricula, all lives matter, using POC culture as Halloween costumes. You don't have an accent, but they have black colleges prioritizing white people as experts on everything. Denial of racism, tokenism, cultural appropriation, treating children of color as adults. You're so articulate. White self-segregating neighborhoods, churches, and schools. Where are you really from? Weaponizing whiteness, coded racist language and actions. My intention was not racist. Racist sports mascots, mass incarceration, colorism, school to prison pipeline, English only, fetishizing POC, I never say this word right. Meritocracy, myths. We need qualified people. Eurocentric beauty standards, white savior complex, claiming reverse racism, colorblindness, playing the race card, excusing white explaining racism, and mission trips. No comment. All right, so white silence. Often, white people feel that racial issues are not their concern, or that they don't have the expertise to or the right to speak out about racial injustice. Oddly enough, I actually mentioned this before. Same video, July 2019. I mentioned that it seems to me that you always want us to speak for ourselves, but if a overt racist person does not see me as a person, the only person that can really speak to them is their peer. That's it. Okay, and so in fact, many blame people of color and white allies when they challenge racism, claiming that racism will go away if people wouldn't call attention to it. Okay, racism is a function of institutionalized racial discrimination, privilege, marginalization, and even violence that supports and protects white people. It is essential that white people who are concerned about justice work with people of color and teach other white people to recognize and interrupt racism. I already said it, okay? 2019, before I even started this channel, I made a video. It's posted. Excuse me. That is literally exactly what I said, okay? So, I think we all understand what racial profiling is, okay? Denying institutional racism. Assuming that racism is only at work when an individual white person or white group uses a racial slur, commits a hate crime, or vandalizes a house of worship. However, systemic and institutional racism are in the very bones and foundations of the society. The wealth gap between white people and people of color, specifically black, brown, and indigenous, is considerable. Okay, the median household income for a white U.S. family is $65,000, while the Latina family is $50,000 and the black family is $40,000. This gap is due to a historic racism in labor unions, which protected workers and ensured higher wages, in banking and mortgage lending laws, and legalized racism practices in housing, education, etc. Now, This is the same thing as like when they try to gaslight and say, well, it's illegal to do that now. There's so many things that people get away with every day as a result of silence, okay? Not believing people, okay? And then also in the sense that, okay, if you were doing that for 100 years, it's not going to just magically pick back up. They're not going to magically get better just because you made a law and said it's not. Since when has something been illegal stop people from doing the illegal thing? Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is letting them get away with it with silence. And then the damage has already been done. Okay? So those are things to consider about that. I'm done with this right here. Okay? We understand police brutality against people of color. And personally, I believe police brutality happens to everyone. Okay? When we speak on per capita, it's definitely a higher rate for people of all colors. I'm gonna start saying people of all colors instead of people of color. Adam Preach made a very good point that some people don't like to be lumped together like that. So we'll say people of all colors. But not all lives matter type. Okay. So tone policing, okay, is a set of tactics, tools, and catchphrases used by white people holding privilege to prevent marginalized people from sharing their experiences of oppression. Tone policing works by derailing a discussion, usually about a topic that the policer is not central or expert, by focusing on the emotions of the speaker rather than the message itself. Now, this particular tactic is literally found in the foundation of covert emotional incest. It's not exclusive to race, okay? So if I'm very passionate about something and I'm speaking to my mother and she says to me, okay, why are you raising your voice at me? You're so disrespectful, completely ignoring everything else I'm saying. This is where that comes from. And it's not exclusive to white people, but when it comes to that race relations, that's commonly something that they will say. Okay, I get it in comment sections. I'm not even speaking loud. Why are you writing a whole paragraph? You know what I'm saying? That's a form of tone policing, and it happens across the board. Okay, I've had someone say that to me, and they were definitely black. Okay, so it's not something that's exclusive to. But when we recognize where we're all doing something, it helps to alleviate it. Because I think part of the problem when it comes to racism is that I feel like you can't be racist and not a narcissist to some extent. It doesn't just stop at race, because it's going to affect how you raise your children and everything, right? So if we recognize what we're all doing, okay, you can't come to a narcissist and be like, hey, you're doing this. They don't respond to that. Okay, they don't respond to that. The last thing they want is to feel shame. So if we don't point the finger specifically at them and we say, hey, we're all doing this to each other, in some senses, they might be a little more open to listening to it. My opinion, not necessarily proven, right? But so tone policing, definitely something that happens across the board. There's only one human race. I don't see color. Is literally, I cannot stand that shit. You do. You do. I see it. You see it. We see it. You know. You see it. Everything about me is different. You see it. What's important is how you treat people, and if that's your excuse for why you're not racist, then you're probably racist. Okay, sorry. White people often say this when the conversation about race becomes uncomfortable for them in an attempt to curtail honest, painful conversation and confrontation about the realities and the devastation brought on by racism. And I've had this comment said to me a few times. You know what I'm saying? I don't, you know, when I'm sitting and I'm really giving them some deets, Okay, they don't want to, but I don't even see color anyway. But I had my babysitter leave my home because I called the neighborhood kids niglet. You know what I'm saying? But you don't see color. Okay, all right. So yes, of course, God only created one human race, and the biblical story of the Pentecost suggests God also created and celebrated that human race comprises diverse tribes, nations, languages, colors, physical features, and cultures. However, since the days of Moses, racial bias and racial injustice and racism have been lived out by the human race. And racism at the personal and institutional levels is still prevailing fact of life in church and society. To not see color is not to see the beauty of God's richly diverse human creation, and also to ignore the real impact of racism that affects people of color every moment of their lives. Yo, that was a very touching comment. I really liked that. To not see color is not to see the beauty of God's richly diverse human creation, and also to ignore the impact of racism that affects people of color every moment of their lives. And yet, and still, this is still something that is not exclusive to white people. Okay, black people say it too, and sometimes I feel that it's said because it's like a don't rock the boat statement. Okay, this is a codependent statement. Okay, if I'm sitting here and I'm talking heavy on some race stuff, it's like, look, I don't even know why we're arguing. We're all the same color. We're all the same race. We're just the human race. It's to calm and to keep from rocking the boat. Okay, so that's a codependent statement, and it continues to enforce what I'm saying about how this can be perceived as some type of narcissism. Okay, so the other is invalidating, disbelieving experiences of people of color. Okay, and so a lot of people say, prove it. I don't think that's racism. That's never happened to me. Why would it? Why would it happen to you? I had a conversation with someone. I have an example for every single one of these, okay? Because I experienced it. I had something happen in a foundation that provides help for people. In fact, it's the group that sponsored my transitional housing, okay? The lady, there was one particular lady, she was not interested in helping me financially. The system and the program is set there to help me financially, but she didn't want to do it, and she lowballed my assistance. I needed $1,000. She gave me $600. Okay. Then she came to me and she kept saying to me, "Yeah, I gotta pay that. I gotta handle that. I gotta get those receipts together." Like as if I was taking from her own pocket. The person that they were paying had told me many times that they would pay up to $3,000. So I found it interesting that she would only give me $600. So when I go to her coworker and I tell her about that, well, I wasn't there. I don't know what was said. I'm not even accusing her of being racist, but the facts are that she was, okay? And that is an example of that. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I don't know. Every time I talk to her, she's nice. Okay, so understand this. People of color are the experts. A function of systemic racism is that it is often invisible to white people, in part because the entertainment and news media, educational systems, political and moral ideologies, even the church are all based on the belief that white opinions, white experiences, and white definitions are primary and true. Okay, so I said something similar to this. When I say how some of this stuff that I've been talking about in my readings is an inspiration of scripture, because almost every belief system across the planet, it doesn't even matter if that belief system is of people of color, it upholds white people. It puts down every single one. All right, so that's facts. All right, touting respectability politics, similar to tone policing. This idea started as philosophy among black elites during Reconstruction who believed that they could best uplift the race and end racism by correcting the bad traits of black people and working hard to prove to white people that black people are just like you or want to be just like you. This idea has similar expressions among other people of color. This meant pursuing the American dream through a college education and a well paying job, raising families according to the white standards, keeping one's hair neat and straight, speaking proper English, and generally avoiding the appearance of threatening or being angry with white people. And again, this goes back to what is it? Assimilation, appropriation, and appreciation video. Okay. Why it's such a big deal for people to gatekeep when they live in America. In contemporary parlance, it is often still used by elite people of color and white people as the appropriate path to success and assimilation. Oh. Anti-racism work, however, recognizes that the rules of respectability are just another way to control and silence people of color, especially people who push against the be like white people narrative. Dr. Martin Luther King was married, educated, heterosexual, a Christian clergyman who was always dressed in a suit, spoke eloquently, and who masterfully used non-violent civil disobedience. He was wearing a neat, short haircut and a suit and a tie when he was assassinated. And while many white Christians were among those who mourned him, other white Christians openly celebrated his death, even in their worship services. People of color who affect social, moral, and political change, from Gandhi to Mandela, all find that assimilation and respectability do not convince or convert those people who deny your very humanity. Because if it's not that, it's always going to be something else. In this case, for Martin Luther King Jr., it was the fact that he wanted equality. He wanted to be seen as human. He did everything that he was supposed to do. He didn't fight. He literally did exactly what you think that a protest is supposed to look like. He did it. That was not good enough. Okay, it's always going to be something. So fear of people of color. A group called, hi Brittany. It was a comment on Britney Spears stuff. It's not Britney Spears. But I love her a lot. I don't really like, well, Aaron listens to her a lot. He calls her Lady Spears. He calls her Lady Spears, but he listened to her a lot. But ultimately, I hope she's doing well. Anyway, the Perception Institute cites research about the phenomenon of racial anxiety, which refers to the heightened levels of stress and emotion that humans may experience when interacting with people of other races. Okay, it impacts people of color who may worry that they will be subject of discrimination or hostility. White people, meanwhile, worry that they will be assumed to be racist or that people of color, unless restrained, policed, or segregated, will mistreat white people as revenge for the way whites have treated people of color. And I would say that is the common reason as to why more people don't fight for equality too. So white people have been taught subliminally to fear and other African Americans and other people of color. This causes a kind of feedback loop where their everyday interactions reinforce the fears and anxieties of both white people and people of color. And so we could go back to the stats for violence, right? So if you think that black people are violent, every time you approach a black person and you think they're angry, every time you approach them, you're functioning on anxiety, causing an adverse interaction with them, right? Not only that, because there's the deniability of the level of violence that you put on other people, you don't recognize that it's not. You're actually they're probably more afraid of you. Sorry. Sometimes I gotta laugh about this shit, okay? Because me, I'm not afraid of anybody. I have stated that I am. I self segregate from time to time, but it's because like they said, black people, people of color were experts on racism. So there are things that will be said. There are gestures. There are certain things that you can note from far. Okay, so certain phrases, certain things that lets me know this might not be the best situation. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, I'm not against anyone. I often say, work on your own community, and then we can meet back at the headquarters, and we can all chill. You know what I'm saying? But work on your group first. So I'm trying to help today. I'm here to help. You know. So denying white privilege. Um, I don't think I'm gonna speak on that one. Actually, I am. It says white skin opens many doors for whites, whether or not we approve of such practices. So, white people are seldom asked to speak for or represent their entire race. White Christians can visit most U.S. churches and find Jesus and biblical characters portrayed as white. White children can count on school curricula celebrating heroes and heroines from their racial group. White people can remain oblivious to the language and customs of people of color without feeling any loss or penalty because of the lack of that knowledge. Um, so, yes, okay, but I'm glad I read it because that happens in any group. That happens in any group. Black privilege kind of functions in the same sense on that last one, okay? Um, I'm gonna put words in. Black people can remain oblivious to the language and customs of their own people. Uh, well, actually, we can't. Okay, I get it. Sorry, I read it wrong. If we don't know our own culture, we are also outcasted. You know what I'm saying? We're outcasted from our own group. So I read that wrong, and so then I tried to put it in there. It doesn't work. What if all U.S. citizens had to learn Cherokee or Shawnee to renew their citizenship? One positive aspect of white privilege is that when white people speak and act against racial injustice, it often receives more attention and respect from other white people in power. A comment that already has been stated by myself. Okay, the bootstrap theory, I've already kind of touched on a little bit because when we speak about the institutionalized way that they kept our wages down and the pay gaps, it's the same. How would one fix that without some type of system in place to make sure that we are compensated for the long term damage that was created by the institutionalized tactics? You know what I'm saying? I might not be using that right. It's okay. You get it. And it brings up Martin Luther King yet again. Oh, I'm gonna read it. Okay, I'm gonna read it because I didn't see that. But so a common ideal among white people and some others in the United States is that I pulled myself up by my bootstraps to make it. Why can't they? The assumption, which is false, is that every person or group starts with the exact same set of opportunities, resources, roadmaps, and privileges. With regard to race, gender, and ability, especially, the playing field is not level and has never been level. Okay, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. addressed this in a 1967 NBC TV broadcast when he told a reporter that black people historically have not had boots, let alone bootstraps. Generations of land ownership have long been foundational in wealth building for U.S. families, businesses, and colleges. When Europeans came to U.S. shores, the government gave them land to plan towns, cities, homes, businesses, schools, etc. Consider during that same history that Native Americans were driven from the land they owned onto reservations. African Americans were brought to the U.S. in slavery, and when freed from enslavement, were given neither land nor money to help them get started. Many Chinese Americans were lured to this nation to work for near slave wages to build the railroads to support white businesses and white travel. Native Hawaiians and Latina people were conquered, and their lands were stolen by European conquerors. In addition, often when communities of color began to acquire land and wealth, they were terrorized, felled by disease, and sometimes slaughtered by white supremacists. And some of those diseases were directly placed by them. Okay? That was impactful. I like it. It mentions the Tulsa massacre here, okay? And it also says the internment of Japanese Americans, the Sand Creek massacre, which I've actually never heard of, so I'm going to look into that later. The 18th century decimation of the native Hawaiians, okay? To say that people should simply pull themselves up by their bootstraps denies the historic and ongoing pervasiveness of institutional racism and racial terrorism that is deprived people of color of equitable resources and opportunities. You are literally the Borg. You will assimilate, or you will be destroyed. You know what I'm saying? Requiring the emotional labor of people of color. Okay, this refers to racist microaggressions that people of color regularly endure because of conscious or unconscious systemic racism, and it can cause anxiety, depression, and even physical symptoms that take a toll on bodies and souls. This labor usually comes because people of color are expected by white people to excuse, tolerate, and make allowances for racist words and actions. Okay? Example, a Korean American woman, pastor, wearing a clergy robe, walks into a white church on Sunday morning where she's a guest preacher. And a church member approaches her and says, "I hope you don't have an accent, because I won't understand a word you say." Bless your heart. They didn't say bless your heart. I just added it on there because it sounds so funny. Okay. The guest pastor smiles and walks away. Example number 2. A black male employee joins his white colleagues for his first staff meeting, and one of the colleagues says, "I'm really proud that we have affirmative action at this workplace." Pause. Pause. Because there was this guy that used to come into my algorithm so much, and he was so covert racist, it was annoying. But one of the things he had said was, I think they should make some changes to affirmative action because I have some Asian American friends that could really use it. 1. Affirmative action actually benefits white women more than any other demographic. Number 2, Asian Americans. Just so you know. We're going to throw that out there. But anyways, there have been changes already made to affirmative action, and it still benefits the same group. In fact, there was a lawsuit where a girl had tried to say that affirmative action was the reason she didn't get into college, and they found out that through the affirmative action program, like whatever that program was that did affirmative action, it only let 2 black people in. It let in 37 white people or something like that. And like the number was, it was definitely exact. It literally followed the statistics about it. It was like all these white people a couple Asians, more Asians than Hispanics, some Hispanics and Latin Americans, and two black people. No black people took your spot, baby. Maybe you might want to go talk to your classmate. Anyway, that was completely off topic, but in both these instances, the white people involved make racist assumptions and assertions while being almost certain that the people of color will, at least, not call the white people out and, at best, may be offended, but no better than to confront white people on their home turf. People of color are expected to give white people the benefit of the doubt because they just don't know better or didn't intend to be racist. That takes an emotional, spiritual, and physical toll on people of color and affects how they move through a white-dominated society. Okay, this is silencing. It's still a level of tone policing, because if that person would have responded, then they would say, hold up, why are you getting so upset? Okay, why? What's going on? Okay, plausible deniability, you know. So I already spoke on rewriting history. Okay, but real quick, here's another example. Okay, a group of so-called U.S. Civil War historians have advanced the narrative that the war was not about race or enslavement of Black Americans. Rather, they assert that the war was a revolt by the U.S. South against the encroachment of an increasingly unfair federal government. The presenting issue was that the federal government had proposed a hefty tax on slave owners, and it was a battle for the states' rights. Yeah, okay. So shit like that as well. And I think it's Daughters of Confederacy, okay? In certain southern states, for a very long time, they rewrote history, and they allowed their history books into the schools, and that's what actually kept that Confederate flag thing going. But you know, and also stuff like changing the dictionary. Okay, so another thing they do, the best suggestion that I ever got from a man of the hour was to look at the dictionary of the time period, right? So slavery has a different definition when slavery was actually taking place versus it now. So does racism. Racism, when it first was introduced, I think it was introduced in the 1980s, the definition is completely different than it is now. But the thing about it is that the racism term that you use now, that's in the dictionary now, is the one that supports the reverse racism. Okay? I'm not saying that reverse racism isn't completely accurate. I prefer reverse prejudice, because race, it's more about, okay, I'm prejudging this white person to be racist, and not necessarily I am racist against white people. Most black people, most people of color are, you know, every group has an extremist, right? There's going to be some extreme black people when it comes to their prejudice, people of color when it comes to their prejudice, but most just want the shit to end. You know, say, can't we just all get along? So it's mentioning here the changing of the word slaves to servants, and enslaved blacks to immigrants. Okay. So Eurocentric school curricula. You know, I'm not really going to talk on that, but I've spoken on it briefly a couple times, which is like, we were all reading the same books, all of us, all right? So that instills self-hate for those who are not, and superiority for those who are. Very simple. There's so many heroes, there's so many inventors, okay? All the inventors, except for George Washington Carver, I didn't know of a whole bunch of black inventors when I was young, because the book focused specifically on white inventors. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, that is all I'm going to say on that one, because I've mentioned it a couple times. Okay. All lives matter. Okay. The example it gives, which I love very much because I have a video entitled with the very verse, okay? It says, when Jesus says, let the children come, or blessed are the peacemakers, he certainly didn't mean that the adults and non peacemakers do not matter. We just leave it at that, okay? Um, the fact that a lot of people believe that Black Lives Matter was anti white was the problem. I had to stop being friends with some of them because they said that shit. I'm like, all right, bro. Go. In fact, I posted something. I had added a white person from high school, and I put him on blast because he was the only white person at the time. Remember when I first started my Facebook page, I only had like 175 friends. And I said, yo, hey, I haven't seen you in a while, but you're literally the only white person here, okay? If you out all lives matter shit, bro, we can't be friends. And he unfriended me. Which is crazy. You know? It's really crazy. Because he was real down with the brown. But anyway, I'm going to say something about that. Wearing people of color as costumes or sports mascots, I think we know. Prioritizing white people as experts on everything, okay? There are people of color in almost every profession and field one can name. However, our society usually privileges white voices and white opinions as most reliable. You know, and that's facts. That even goes, I've been doing surveys and stuff, and if I say that I'm black, they'll kick me out of the survey sometimes. Like they don't want my opinion. um so as one works to understand and resist racism, one must expand the notion of expertise to include and elevate the voices, experiences, and unique perspectives of people of color. So this can be done in so many ways. Like if you decide that you want to read about something new, personally, you should make it a point to find people of multiple races and multiple ethnic backgrounds, right? So if I put in, for instance, we'll use an easy example. I want to exercise. I have multiple ethnic backgrounds giving me exercise material. I have men, I have black men, I have white men, I have Chinese and Asian men. I keep saying Chinese first. I apologize. Asian men, Asian women, Hispanic women, Latin American women, black women. Like I use all of their expertise, not just one, right? And even sometimes to go as far as different countries. So in the same way, for anything you want to learn, rather than just go, okay, to a familiar face, choose other people because they have different experiences that can help broaden your perspective. Okay, if you're only ever watching people that were raised in the suburbs, well, then that's the only type of perspective you're gonna get. Okay, now, I mean, we can. There's not much I can do for national news, right? But you can do that because there's plenty of different types of people that report on stuff all the time. Okay, you could try TYT, the Young Turks. They're progressive. I just mentioned Hassan Abi the other day. He used to be there 2 years and years and years ago. Okay, I've been rocking with them for a while. So denying the reality of institutional system of racism. Not gonna really get into that. I think we're done here. Oh no, we're not, because we have tokenism. I was a token black friend for a very long time. Um, I've spoken on that girl before, but the group as a whole, it was a terrible experience. Okay, they weren't racist because I was their black friend, but everything they did to me was very racist. So, you know, tokenism is a superficial numbers game that comes in response to people of color calling for greater racial diversity in previously white dominated spaces. Okay. Um, in church structures, it may be hiring a person of color as associate pastor of a white church while keeping the rest of the leadership and the leadership and ministry focused on people who are white. It may mean making sure to have at least one person of color in a visible position in your club, church, workplace, or teaching staff. But listen, black people walk in, I bet you show off your token blackie. Kanye West. But you know, just making sure not to hire too many. And this is speaking in terms of like a group, but like a church or a business setting, but it happens in friendships as well. Um, Cultural appropriation, I've touched on that before. Treating children of color as adults, that's one for me. Okay. A current example of adulting children is the detention of children who are Latina in jail like border camps for immigrants deemed illegal. Deploying police, resource officers in public schools with more children or youth of color. Boys of color, especially black and Latino boys, are often labeled early on as being being the behavioral problems in school and threats when they are out playing or even just walking around. Okay, so a great example of that is Tamir Rice. Okay, um, or the example, the one they just brought up, I'll never forget that one. 2019, an example of the 11-year-old black girl's encounter with a police officer after she reportedly took more than her share of milk from her school. Now, the thing with that is, that still can be brought down to covert emotional incest as well, because black parents actually have a tendency to treat their children more adult-like than other children, okay? And then also, um, well, it is kind of like a covert emotional incest thing, okay? So if I'm treating my child like he's an adult and he can make capable decisions, okay, and we actually do it to everybody, okay? When a 15-year-old girl gets pregnant, not even at a mature, your brain doesn't mature until you're 21, right? And parents will talk about, well, you're gonna have to suffer the consequences. You should have understood your actions, but they really didn't. They couldn't have. So it's not just a race thing. But in terms of white to black, or like white to any person of color, it really kind of is. Okay? One of the things I always say is I'm always worried about my son being out in public because he's 6'3", actually 6'4" now. Okay? He looks like a grown man. Okay? But he does not act like a grown man. Cute pie. Right? You would expect him to know certain things that he doesn't know. And that also can be boiled down to looking at a black person and seeing them 4 years older than they are. And then you expect them to behave on that level. So if he looks at an 11-year-old girl, he automatically sees her as 15. A 15-year-old does know better than to steal, at the very least. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, so we have higher standards for children who are young. That's why they get punished more heavily in jail and things of that nature. One of the things that can also be looked at, like, I just saw a video about this. Okay, 2 7-year-old children go into a psychiatrist's office. A white mother says that her child is hearing voices and wants to stab people, and they said, oh, well, that's just because they need to seek control, and they may be experiencing Anxiety, right? And when the black child goes in, he's psychotic, he needs medication, right? It's still the same type of instance here, because that child, it's essentially that child should know better. They don't need to cope. They're it's about how they see their ability to process. I'm using this. I don't know why. You're so articulate. You're so English. Your English is so excellent. Okay. It shows the implication is that the person of color is acceptable to white people because he or she they talk, act, and comport in a non-stereotypical way. Speaks or acts with confidence, intelligence, and calmness that makes white people feel more comfortable than they would with a typical person of that race. Exhibits competence and intelligence that the white speaker assumes is atypical for a person of color. Okay, definitely have gotten this one before. And the person who inspired this whole little series, three-part series, I recall you mentioning something like that about one of your previous neighbors. I don't know if they're still your neighbor. I can't remember if they were previous, but you mentioned that. Very similar. Okay. You know the funniest. I've had that said to me many times, but you know the funniest place that it's been said to me, in the strip club. They hired me because I was so articulate. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, but it's because they had a lot of white men coming in there with a lot of money. They don't want, uh, you know, someone who doesn't speak well in there running off their white men. Okay, so I think everybody's understanding of what white self-segregating neighborhoods, schools, and churches are. I actually grew up in one. At the time that I lived in my specific neighborhood, okay, now the whole city wasn't like that, but my specific neighborhood, it was so known that it was primarily white. Okay, there's only three families. Uh, I don't remember what your name is. Your first name was Jordan, and then there was Joel, and then there was my family. Three families, three black families. Okay, my parents actually had to contact the NAACP in order to be let in there. Okay, but it was so known how exclusive this area was to white people that one day I went to school and they decided that the black people were too disruptive during exam time. So after a certain point in time, everybody would be like in study hall or something, and it was causing disruption because they were getting so loud, they were having too much fun. They decided they were going to send all black kids home, okay? Because the black kids lived over the bridge, all right? So one day I'm walking, and the principal comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, why aren't you getting your on the bus?" I was like, "Oh," my friend was mad too. You think I live over there? No, I'm walking home. My house is right there. Because it was within a mile of the school. My for like 2 years they didn't have a bus for my area because we were so close to the school and the levy didn't pass or something like that. But that's an example. Like he was aware that primarily all the black children lived in a particular area, and he questioned me. Right? I've experienced all of this. Okay, so anyway, where are you from is a question that Asian Americans and other racial ethnic minority groups have been asked for far too often by people that dominate. If we pretend to be ignorant of what the questioner is asking and respond, "I'm from Berkeley," the next question will be, "Where are you really from?" Okay, so it implies that the United States cannot be our home. Weaponizing whiteness, we've recently seen that when the woman started, and we see it all the time, but the most recent one that I saw was the woman who started asking for help when a boy was getting on her bike. Because without his proof, she would have been able to say that he was harming her. Okay? So calling on the institution or practices to punish people of color Okay. This is an ironic practice in which some white people will deny the existence and impact of racism while simultaneously using racism and privilege against people of color. When white members of a white congregation in historically white Christian denomination are allowed to, by the judicatory, to plead not ready for a pastor of color and have that request honored. Ah, I see. So, hey, this church is not ready for that. That's using your whiteness, okay, weaponizing your whiteness. We are so traditional. We aren't ready for a black pastor. You know, I don't think this neighborhood is ready for a black family. You know, I don't think. You know, but also just, and then there's the historic example of white women using law enforcement and criminal justice systems to punish men of color by falsely accusing them of threatening violence, especially of a sexual nature. This serves to play into stereotypes that men of color lust after or want to harm white women, and to inflame white men into authority to defend or avenge the white women. Okay, and that one's very easy because they do it all the time. There are plenty of women that you can find on TikTok talking about how they're gonna call the police on their black baby daddy. You know what I'm saying? And you know he'll believe me. I don't think you do your neck roll like that. Yeah, that's too black for you. See? That would be like a microaggression. All right. Anyway, coded racist language and actions. You know, sketchy, unsafe, okay? And it's kind of funny because it says there's nothing more sketchy than white neighborhoods. Facts, because in black neighborhoods, most of the time, okay, there's cases where it's not the case, but most of the time, if you're walking around in a black neighborhood, you're white, a lot of times I've seen black people walk up to them like, hey, do you need help? But on the flip side, if I walk in your neighborhood, I lived in my neighborhood, okay? And they, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Get away from here. I'm calling the police on you. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I live right there. Yeah, you see my house? You can actually see the top of my house from where we're standing right now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Went into the all lives matter. I went. I did it. My intention was not racist. So, the Reverend Michelle Letter, former Director of Equity and Anti-Racism at the General Commission on Religion and Race, who is committed to lifelong work as a white woman seeking to understand and dismantle racism, says, for those of us who are white, any attempt to defend ourselves against being called racist, whether we are explicit or not in saying I'm not racist, or attempting to explain intent, is in itself racism. Unconscious, implicit bias, and microaggressions born of an institutional racism are so embedded in the white psyche that intent is not necessary. Essentially, it's like, hey, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but you're fat. You know that what you're about to say is going to hurt feelings, right? So in the same sense, I'm not trying to be racist, but racist sports mascots. I really won't get into that one. I'm not very sensitive about it, but there are some that are. And then, you know, mass incarceration, everybody knows that. Colorism is something that everybody does. Everybody does it. But again, what hurts one group hurts all groups, okay? So if I've been living for centuries being with the paper bag test, essentially other groups start to inherit that behavior. Okay, so especially in India, I've mentioned it before. In India, they were upset about the color of their grandchild. You know what I'm saying? In black families, there was the white. The interracial couple, she got backlash because her daughter didn't have green eyes. You know what I'm saying? It happens everywhere. Okay, so school to prison pipeline, English only. Okay, those are those people that if you're gonna come here, you need to learn to speak the language. You need to learn to speak the language. And then they go. The funny thing is, they go somewhere else and they're like, "Why don't you know English?" Sorry, I don't know why I did that accent. Sorry. Why don't you know English? And you're like, I'm at home. I'm in Cuba. Like, what? You know, the Eurocentric beauty standards, which I've also spoke on, and the white savior complex. This one I'm gonna touch on. Claiming reverse racism. This is a race card pulled by white people when people of color call out racism or racial bias or create a space that is not led or dominated by white people. The claim is used to prove that people of color don't have it so badly, or that white people are just as subject to racism as anyone else. Reality check. Racism is a racial prejudice backed by institutional power, so that white people are not subject to racism. Of course, white people may have experienced hostility, ignorant comments, and even violence from people of other races. However, the U.S. criminal justice, financial, educational, political, cultural systems are in place to support and protect the interests of white people and to penalize people of color who confront them. Another way this can be seen too, I'm gonna say something to you, person who inspired this series. You have said this. You have said this. And it was because the job that you were at was primarily white now, or excuse me, primarily black. And they either isolated or kept you from a promotion. I can't really remember the basics behind it. But one thing I can say is that I have witnessed a lot of these from you in your readings. Okay, that I said I wasn't going to get into it. You have a few issues. I'm not going to get into it. That's what I said. But this is actually what I was speaking on. I see it all the time in your readings. And so when you stated that you'd been discriminated against, they all were black and they didn't like you. The chances that they were recognizing this in you is more likely than you being outcast because you're white. We self-segregate and we protect ourselves. If you're running around here talking about, oh, you speak so well, you're the good kind of black person. I'm not trying to be racist, but could you maybe, if you're doing any of that in a primarily black space, there is no reason for them to work with you at all. Like, just so you know, I don't know how you behaved, and I don't know how they behaved, so I'm not taking up for them, but maybe consider, after hearing some of these things, that that's actually what was the cause of the reverse racism. So, I don't think of you as black. I got that a lot. I don't see color, okay? It implies that in order for white people to feel comfortable with, befriend, accept, and interact with people of color, they have to ignore or overlook race, ethnicity, or culture. Okay? And so, yeah, a lot of my friends back in the day, they used to call me white. And I used to hate that. I used to hate it. It used to hurt my feelings, actually. I never really said that, but it did. Because I'm black. I'm black and I'm proud. Okay? So, essentially, I don't see you like a black person. I see you like a white person. You talk like a white person. You dress like a white person. Dude, I took a picture in front of a Confederate flag once. If I could ever find that picture, I would show it to you. Okay? But it wasn't because, it's because they told me it was because we like country music. Okay? If you ever say something like that, it's done. It's who you are. Okay. Uh, I'm done with this article. Okay. This was a very long video, but I'm gonna give you one more. Actually, two more. The second one is very short. Okay, very short, like 2 paragraphs. This one though, I don't think it'll be long. How many tables is this? It's only 2 tables, so we should be. It's 3 tables. We'll do 3. So, just like in the subliminal message video, covert emotional incest and subliminal messaging, this is the same for microaggressions. This essentially, the theme, the microaggression, and the message. Okay, so alien in own land. But when Asian Americans and Latino Americans are soon to be foreign. Where are you from? Where are you born? You speak good English. A person asking an Asian American to teach them words in their native language. Those are the microaggression. The message is you are not American, you are a foreigner. Okay? It's not always wrong to ask somebody if you're truly invested in the culture. Okay, but you would know. You'd know if you were not, right? Ascription of intelligence, assigning intelligence to a person of color on the basis of their race. You are a credit to your race. Sorry, phone's about to die, so I guess I'm not doing my reading. You are so articulate. Asking an Asian person to help with math or science problem are the microaggressions, and the message is people of color are generally not as intelligent as whites. It is unusual for someone of your race to be so intelligent. All Asians are intelligent and good in math and sciences. Okay, so the theme is colorblindness, statements that indicate that a white person does not want to acknowledge race. The microaggression will look like, when I look at you, I don't see color. America is a melting pot. There's only one race, the human race, okay? And then denying a person of color's racial, ethnic experiences, assimilate, I don't know that word, acculturate to the dominant culture, and denying the individual as a racial, cultural being. Black people do this too, or like other races do this too to white people. Okay, I don't really fuck with white people, but you cool. You know what I'm saying? It's a very similar type of microaggression. Or it can also be like you black. Actually, the whole inviting people to the barbecue is a form of that. Anyway, criminality, assumption of criminal status. A person of color is presumed to be dangerous, criminal, or deviant on the basis of their race, and that's the theme. The microaggression is a white man or woman clutching their purse or checking their wallet as, this is really small, as a black or Latino person approaches or passes, a store owner following a customer of color around the store, and a white person waits to ride the next elevator when a person of color is on it. It says that you are a criminal and you are going to steal, you are poor, or you do not belong, you are dangerous. These are nothing new. Again, it's just my turn. Okay? And when I was a kid, there was one instance where a white man, he was a big white man. Very big. Very big. Not big like heavy, like big like, right? My mom locked her car door and he got upset. He knocked on her window and asked her why she did that. All right. So, theme. Denial of individual racism, a statement made when whites deny their racial biases, okay? I'm not racist. I have several black friends. As a woman, I know what you go through as a racial minority. I am immune to racism because I have friends of color, is what you're saying. Your racial oppression is no different than my gender oppression. I can't be racist. I'm like you. these words come out your mouth, man. So, myth of meritocracy, meritocracy. I'm not saying it right. Meritocracy, democracy, meritocracy. I'm not saying it right, but anyway, statements which assert that race does not play a role in life successes. I believe the most qualified person should get the job. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough. People of color are given extra unfair benefits because of their race. People of color are lazy and or incompetent and need to work harder. Um, so, pathologizing cultural values, communication styles, the notion that the values and communication styles of dominant white culture are ideal. Now, essentially, I'm reading the same thing, but I'm just giving you the what the microaggression looks like. So, asking a black person, "Why do you have to be so loud or animated? Just calm down." To an Asian or Latino person, "Why are you so quiet? We want to know what you think. Be more verbal. Speak up more." Dismissing an individual who brings up race culture in work or school settings. Leave your cultural baggage outside. uh, the theme is second class citizen occurs when a white person is given preferential treatment as a consumer over a person of color. Okay, so the aggression could be person of color mistaken for a service worker. Okay, or having a taxi cab pass a person of color and pick up a white passenger. People of color are servants to whites and they couldn't possibly occupy high status positions. This is a primary complaint when it comes to the movie world, where everyone keeps talking about, like, we've had so many great leaders and all that. Why do you only focus on the slaves? Why do you only focus on the help? Why do you only focus on, like, the race leaders? Like, you never focus on anything other than those three things. It's the same thing here. And even to say that maybe even some of these movies are a subliminal message to people to continue on that path. And it also says you are likely to cause trouble and or travel to a dangerous neighborhood. There's another example. Occurs when a white person is given preferential treatment. Being ignored at the store as attention is given to a white customer. And the comment, "You people. You don't belong, or you are a lesser being," and whites are more valued as a customer. Because primarily, if you think that they're poor, then why would you even bother to help them? How dare you think that you deserve my service? You know, I've experienced all these things. So, as I'm reading these, it's like, wow, I actually have experienced a lot of racism, but you're so used to it that you don't. I said that the majority of the things that I experienced were from people that know me well, but ultimately, like, there's been a lot of instances that I can think of that weren't just on a personal level. And this kind of opened my eyes. I don't know if that's good or bad, you know? The last one, I don't really find to be, I mean, it is. Okay, environmental microaggressions, macro level microaggressions, which are apparent on systemic and environmental levels. So the examples are college or university with buildings that are all named after white, heterosexual, upper class males. Television shows and movies that feature predominantly white people without representation of people of color, which we got into. Overcrowding of public schools in communities of color, and overabundance of liquor stores in communities of color, as well as abortion clinics. But you know, with that being shut down, when I was in Ohio, or I'm in Ohio, but when I was in Columbus, they went from having like a few to having two, and then now it's illegal. So I don't know if they're still open. It says that you don't belong, you won't succeed, there is only so far you can go, you're an outsider, you don't exist, and people of color don't or shouldn't value education, and people of color are deviant. So these are, like I said, microaggressions are subliminals, right? So if they are giving you the subliminal that intelligence is not important, that school is not important, that's actually why most black men are on the lower end of graduating from college. They think it's dumb. They think it's stupid. Okay, now part of that is half the battle is the parents' battle. But if society isn't making education exciting for you, it's kind of like no way you would win. Damn, both my phones about to die. Okay, so this was a really long video. In fact, this is one of the longest videos I ever did. I mean, long in terms of like I do long readings, but I try to keep my other videos short. So I wanted to bring that up. I didn't want to. My shoulder was tapped. It's time to speak your opinion and facts at the same time. Okay, your opinion that's based off facts, all right, and your experiences as well. You've inspired me. You know, I talk all the time. I don't really like to talk on the racial shit, but you have inspired me to do such. It's kind of disappointing, to be honest with you. I don't have high hopes for anybody, really. But, I mean, I have high hopes, but I'm essentially, I mean, I've seen it the whole time. So it's not like, it's just disappointing that it got to the point where I had to say something. I think that's what I mean. Like, it's disappointing to the point that I had to say something, 3 whole videos. And, you know, now this makes it so that I have 2 hands worth of racial related videos. You know, I often don't talk about it because I feel that my work will eventually bring us together, but sometimes that does include speaking on it directly. And in this case, that's what I'm doing here. And so it's not exclusive to white people. I showed you some things that black people do as well, and other cultures and groups. But I hope that this helps you to see how you've actually been affecting your following. Okay, a lot of us are already conditioned to accept it. Okay, like when you made that comment, I saw somebody go back and forth with you a little bit, and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, all right, you're a really good reader, okay." Not me. That was like the final straw. And back when I first started watching, I watched you very often, and I saw it, and I was like, she'll get out of that. She won't be like that, but you haven't. And so now it's time to address that. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I just spent 83 minutes on here. I don't know if I have it in me to do a reading, but if I do find the energy, I'll be back. Okay, we are at the last night before the full moon, so the energy is heavy. You know what I'm saying?